Welcome back to the Shoujo-Verse. I am your host for today, Summosa. Today we'll be talking about representation of disabilities in shoujo and other mangas as well. Our co-hosts for today are Bees and Azayan. What have y'all been up to?
I did a tutorial video, or I made a tutorial video last weekend, and then this weekend I'm editing that video with, what's it called? DaVinci Resolve, and that's a fun program to learn how to use.
Ooh. Is it like
It's free, and it's like super pro.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, if you're ever editing anything, get DaVinci, but you have to have a computer that can handle it.
Oh. Is it like Photoshop where it takes like 30 years to load?
No, actually, well, my computer is brand new, so it doesn't, not on this computer, but my laptop couldn't handle it, so I feel like it's going pretty well.
That's good.
Nice.
What's up with you, Bees?
Well, I've been working at the hospital doing so many COVID tests.
Bees over here.
Thank you for your service.
You deserve a Purple Heart.
I feel like I have a Purple Heart.
Been seeing a lot of toes too.
Yeah, I got a lot of toe bones.
So how does that come? Is it like a shaving or?
Usually it's just a little fragment. I assume that I honestly have no idea what goes on in the OR, but maybe it's like I don't know, a little fragment comes off and they gotta repair it and they put something else in, take out the bad toe, put in a new one.
They take out like the entire toe bone?
Obviously, no, it's just a little
okay.
piece.
I guess they do like a small biopsy and just like take out a bit.
Yeah, you gotta be checking for like a bone infection or something related to diabetes, I feel like. That's what I saw when I looked it up.
Yeah, I think that's what it mostly is.
Oh, yesterday the doctor in ophthalmology removed like some skin tags from a patient, like at the corner of their eyes, and then she sent the samples out for to be tested. She sent some biopsies out, and I made the mistake of looking at it.
Oh, no.
and then I barely didn't throw up.
Oh. Speaking of the human body, let's speak about disabilities.
Yes.
That was a nice smooth transition there.
Have you guys read any manga about any specific disabilities?
Well, maybe we should start with some backstory for ourselves.
True.
Sumo and I are disabled. For myself, I have fibromyalgia and POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So both of those conditions, kind of hard to know which symptoms come from which one, but it can be, I can have days where I can't really work due to pain or just low energy. Sometimes I'll have long episodes of being out of breath and I can't really stand up very well. So there are times, but I don't have trouble getting myself places. Like I can drive, I can go to work, although I do occasionally have to go home early from work or call out for a day due to symptoms. So to me, I don't think of myself as disabled because of that, but since I can still mostly like manage my life without help, but there are definitely times where I do need help. And then I also work in the medical field, so I work around a lot of disabled people, amputees, people who are legally blind. So because I work in an ophthalmology department, we help people with severe eye disease. So it's really something that is part of my everyday life, both something I experience and something I work around.
Do you need like a walker? A cane. That's the word. I was thinking of the word crane, and I was like, "That's not right." I was trying to say cane. But
no.
Do you have a cane or anything?
No. The thing about my condition is it doesn't cause. Both of those conditions are not well understood, and POTS is often associated with another disease, which causes like small fiber nerve damage. I don't appear to have that. Who knows? But I don't appear to have that. I get weird kind of symptoms all the time.
Are you talking about EDS?
EDS?
Ehlers
Oh, Ehlers-Danlos? No, I
Danlos?
don't have Ehlers-Danlos.
Yeah.
I don't think I have a connective tissue disorder. I don't have like the stretchy skin.
Okay. Since I have a friend who has EDS, but she also has POTS
Me too. Yeah, my friend has both of those too, but I do not.
Congratulations.
It seems to be associated with autoimmune conditions, but I don't appear to have one. Lucky me.
Lucky
Yeah,
you.
but no.
You beat the genetic lottery this time.
But your body says not yet.
Oh no.
It's not a degenerative condition, so I don't have tissue damage, fortunately. Just weird symptoms. Like, I've had one day where my right leg was numb, and I had to drag it around, but it came back.
I'm happy
So,
for you.
anyway, thank you. Yeah, it could be a lot worse. So, Sumo, tell us about your condition.
So, my main disability, I'm not legally registered as a disabled person, although I think I can, since I literally can't hear in my left ear. When I was younger, I got an ear infection or something similar. It's not an ear infection, it was like an abnormal growth called cholesteatoma. And basically, I got surgery a couple of times to remove it, and it kept on coming back. And eventually, I had a tube implanted, like those tiny itty bitty tubes, and they removed 2 of my 3 hearing bones. So now I just have 1 hearing bone in my left ear. So I can't hear anything at all. My inner ear is fine. So whenever I get hearing tests, the inner ear is fine, and I can technically get like a hearing aid. But I'm so used to it at this point, I don't want to get it. And I've noticed this is like a common thing in a lot of disabled people. They're already so used to how they're living. Like say if you're blind, a lot of blind people would not want to get cured, or like for lack of a better term. But I also have back pain a lot. I got into a car accident 2 years ago, so that's not fun.
Do you feel like you wouldn't get a hearing aid due to the stigma of it, like the cosmetic appearance, or it's just like it's troublesome?
I'm just don't want one. It just seems like a lot of effort to get one. My parents can definitely afford one, and I'm pretty sure my insurance would cover it. It just seems like a pain since I'm already so used to like how it is now. I don't know like how I would be if I got one. If that makes sense. Like I'm so used to it. This is a condition that I've had since I was in I think I got my first surgery in kindergarten or pre-K. So I've had this for what? How old are you when you're in pre-K?
5, 4.
4, 5. So I've had this for like 17 years now. 17. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know, I'm just so used to it. I don't want to get a hearing aid. It just seems like a lot of like extra things I have to deal with. If that makes sense.
No, I can understand. It would be inconvenient.
So like with headphones, I never plug in anything on my left ear. I just have it like it's the headphone cord dangling.
Right. But then people are gonna think that they can talk to you because you have one earbud out.
Yeah, I've noticed that that happens a lot. Or like I usually walk on if I'm walking with a friend, I'll walk on their left side. So because otherwise I can't hear what they're saying. Like I can I mean technically the sound like goes to the other side, like it's if that makes sense. But like it's kind of muffled, or like I'll miss a couple words. So like a common thing I do is like I'll just like if someone says something I don't understand, I'll just like laugh.
My dad does that.
Or like I'll just because I don't know what to do. Like, oh cool, or
we know when he didn't hear what we said because he'll just laugh. I was like, I didn't say something funny, Dad. Let me repeat that for you. He does the same thing. But that brings up a good point, is that I think people with disabilities often have to mold themselves or form habits to not inconvenience other people. Like they have to, for lack of a better word, inconvenience themselves to not inconvenience people without a disability, to work around the people who they have to work with. So yeah, that just brings up a really interesting point about what disabled people have to go through just in their everyday life.
I don't personally think of it as being an inconvenience since like most of my friends know. They're like they go on their own to be on my right side.
But if it was someone you didn't know, like you would have to position yourself. It's not something that's inconvenient so much as just like an extra thing you have to do or think about. And it's a pain to like explain to people, especially like people you don't know very well. It's just like, I don't want you to put this on you, but at the same time, like I tell all of my coworkers about my conditions because there are so many times I'm walking around holding my head or looking grouchy or just like standing support with the wall supporting me, and I don't want them to get overly worried, but I also don't want them to think like I'm upset with them or something. I'm like, if I seem like I'm in a bad mood, I'm just in pain. Like, please don't take it personally. It has nothing to do with you. I'm just in pain.
Aww.
Or like if I'm exceedingly tired, I won't be very responsive. So that's another thing that we have to deal with. It's just like constantly explaining our condition to people so that they don't take it wrong or so they don't misunderstand our behavior. Anyway, that's what I have to do.
So for me, I've never like had a proper job before. Like the most I've done was like had a front desk volunteer shift. I mean, I've had a job before. Wait, I lied. I'm sorry. I had a job before. I did a summer job a couple years ago. But I didn't tell any of my supervisors or anything that I have a hearing problem because I don't want them to know. If that makes sense. Like I just keep this with people if I have to. Like if I have to tell anybody, I will. But if it's like if it's like a professional environment, like even in school, university, I never told my professors that I had a hearing disability. I did tell people in high school or like middle school, like I would prefer to sit up front so I could hear the teacher better. But in college, like you have more control, right, about your environment and like what you can record your professor talking or like you know what I mean? Like you have more um control of your environment versus primary school. So like I never told my professors. I just just studied on my own, or if I misheard something, I would ask my friend.
So, do you feel like in your personal life, has it like complicated any relationships, or has it like how do you think it's impacted your personal life, like relationships with your family and your friends, if it has at all?
So my parents like to say I have selective hearing, and I use it as an excuse. I mean, I do. They're not wrong. Like sometimes I don't hear anything, or like I choose not to hear because I don't want to pay and do it. So I'll just say I don't hear it. But in my personal life, there are times when people think I'm just straight up ignoring them when I just didn't hear them.
Like, so anything in a big way where it impacted you?
No.
No. Just smaller things. Yeah, but those add up.
Yeah, like I can't think of any specific examples, but I know like there were times when somebody would call out to me and I would just ignore them, and then they're like, "Oh, why were you ignoring me?" Like, since none of my relationships are super serious, we're all just like, all my friends are just chill. So, and because I'm a fairly chill person too. I'd say I'm pretty laid back. I don't really take many things seriously.
I've gathered that. Yeah, well, that's good that it hasn't had a serious impact on your relationships. I don't know if mine has had a serious impact, but I do find that because none of my friends have experienced this themselves, like they're all relatively healthy people, they don't have any disabilities, it can be hard for me to get the empathy I need from them. Because they just don't get it, and I don't want to constantly tell them about how much pain I'm in. Like that would just it doesn't do anything. Like I don't need constant sympathy for that. Like I'm not trying to get pity points, and I don't want to complain about my pain all the time, even though I'm always in pain, because that would just remind me that I'm in pain. And I feel like it would be annoying to talk about. And so like I struggle to know how to talk about it with my friends because I want them to understand, and I do really want empathy from them, but at the same time, I don't want to be annoying and like always talking about it. So I think in the end,
You don't want to be the disabled friend.
yeah, well, or like they won't believe me, I guess. Like they'll think I'm exaggerating, is mainly, I think, what I fear. Is that they'll just, or like sometimes when I do talk about it, they'll then come back and start talking about their random aches and pains. And I'm like, okay, like your pains are valid too, but I'm talking about something that's like kind of on another level. And like, it feels to me like they're saying, oh yeah, me too. I have just as much pain as you do. I'm like, no, my friend, no, you don't. This is another thing. Like, maybe that's insensitive of me, but sometimes really makes me feel like they don't understand. So then I wind up just not talking about it, and I stop mentioning it. And then I'm like, am I even allowed to say, like, I don't want to hang out today because I feel really bad? Like, or are they just going to think I'm making up some excuse to not hang out? Even though it's totally legitimate.
That's the thing with like friendships too. Like if you say no too many times, and they just stop inviting you.
I think that's a common train of thought for a lot of people with chronic pain.
Even with anxiety in general, right? If you just can't like mentally or physically get up, like you're just eventually going to be stopped and invited to things if you say no enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are going to address mental health a little bit in this episode, but it's such a large topic that I think we're going to
focus on like more, like we're going to dedicate an episode to mental health in manga, since there's so many.
It's such a large topic to address. I think today we'll stick mostly with the physical disabilities.
All right, let's continue on to discuss manga. The reason why we're all here. I've read a couple of shoujo manga about like deafness, blindness specifically. I've read Kingyusu. A Silent Void is technically shonen, but it has a good Does it really have a romance aspect? Kind of does. And I've read yeah, I think that's it. I think I've read Hidamari ga Kikoeru, or like a sunspot. A blind sunspot. That's a shonen ai. So it kind of counts. Not really. What have you guys read?
For me, I think of a josei, but Perfect World is kind of the top one that comes to mind for disabilities, because the male lead uses a wheelchair. And
I read that one too. Let's go into it.
Have you read that one, Bees?
Have you read it, Bees?
I have not read it, no.
Just think of like your typical josei with like an annoying female lead who kind of makes it about herself. And a disabled guy.
I don't know if I agree with you that she made it about herself, but also it's been a bit since I've read it, so maybe that's true. But I think that that's a realistic...
I mean, it's been a bit for me too.
It's a pretty realistic way to handle the situation, I think, though, is because most of us do make it about ourselves. Like, she doesn't know what he's experienced. Like, she doesn't know what he's going through. So I think at first she really does, like, think selfishly, because that's just not something she's familiar with, and she's never had to think more deeply about it before.
And it is from her point of view too.
It doesn't make her a good person.
But basically, let's do like a quick summary of the manga. Basically, the male lead and the female lead, I think they went to high school together. He did sports. I forgot how like they knew each other. I think they were classmates.
He was the popular guy, and he was really good at sports. He looked like he was gonna have like a great future career in sports.
He also had a girlfriend too, and she was his girlfriend from high school onwards until his accident, and they eventually broke up. But not the female lead, like the male lead's ex-girlfriend. Right. I forgot how he got into an accident, but he ends up like being, I think, half paralyzed.
The waist down.
From bottom half, he can move, but bottom down,
right? He's I don't think he can move. After his accident. And then she winds up running into him again in a work environment, and he's...
I think they're like architects or something.
He's an architect. And she's not an architect, but she works for a firm, I think, and they wind up working on a project together, and she gets she finds out what happened to him, and then discovers that she's kind of interested in him again.
I think he was her first
She had a
love,
crush on
right?
him in high school. And then
She never forgot about him. Oh my god.
But then she she starts getting glimpses of how difficult his day-to-day life is, and his caretaker kind of has a thing for him too, even though she's older. And his caretaker gets like really possessive of him, and is like, you don't know how to care for him. Like, there's no way that you could be his girlfriend or his wife. Like, you don't even know what you would have to do to take care of him.
She's not that much older though. I remember she wasn't like
the caretaker.
50.
Yeah, I don't know her age, but
so if they were like in their late 20s, she would be like late 30s, I think, right? That's an accurate
I
age.
don't remember. I want to say she was in her 40s, but beside the point. So, but then like she also, so Kawana also meets another couple, like an older couple, where the husband uses a wheelchair, and she talks to the wife about her experiences caring for him. And the wife, tells her, like, it was really hard, but it was worth it. Like, we had a lot of bad days, but we had a lot of good days too. So over the course of the story, she starts to consider whether she's willing to take on the responsibility of caring for him, whether she's willing to do some really intense stuff, like when he doesn't move around enough, like he'll get sores on his back, but he doesn't feel them. So like it could get really severe. He could get an infection and he wouldn't even know because he can't feel it. Things like if he's not having bowel movements, like she needs to help him have some bowel movements. And she considers whether she's willing to go through this for him. And I won't spoil the ending, but that's what the story's about. To me, I think it's a really good representation of what a disabled person has to go, specifically a paraplegic has to go through, and what the person who's with them would have to go through. It's really exploratory. I don't think it's really delivering any set message. It's just giving you a glimpse into what this couple's life is like, and what you have to consider when being with a disabled person.
I personally thought the female lead was annoying. I thought like how they like the mangaka still did their research.
Yes, it's very well researched. So this is an example of a manga that properly portrays a disability. It's also a story that is really hyper focused on the disability. It's not one where the disability is there but isn't the main focus. It's really the main focus of the story. That's what it's all about. But I think it's a story that we really need to read, that we really need to hear, because there's not as much representation for disabled people, specifically people with severe disabilities like that. And there's a lot of stigma around it still, and there's just a lot of lack of understanding.
Yeah, for sure. A big one that came out I say, like, when did it come out? 2017? A Silent Voice. That one was really popular. Turned into a movie. The movie was also, like, really popular. You want to explain it, Bees?
Yeah. Basically, the main character is a guy whose name I can't remember right now. Let me look it up.
But the main guy, he's a bully, basically.
Shoya. Yeah. He's the clown and class bully. And a deaf girl named Shoko comes and joins the class, and she has hearing aids. But he spends a lot of time. It's him and other people in the class.
It's the entire class, basically. It's not just him. Everybody is complicit.
Except for one girl who ends up also being bullied because she's friends with Shoko.
I think she transfers out first, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, she does. And eventually, Shoko just gets bullied too much and has to change schools. And also, Shoya's mother has to pay for all the hearing aids that he broke. And then it ends up he gets bullied because everyone places the blame on him. And so taking their own accountability.
Yeah, they didn't want to get in trouble. They didn't want to since like yeah, she's like they broke her hearing aids. They like really bullied her.
After she left, and okay, it goes from being in like elementary school, and then it flashes forward to high school.
Yeah, high school.
Yeah, and Shoya contemplates suicide.
I think he
Um,
ends up like he makes up the money. I remember that part, and he gives it like he drops it off at his mom's place to pay her back for all the like the debt that they were under. Since hearing aids are pretty expensive, from what I understand, and it wasn't just like one hearing aid that he broke. It was like he would break one, and then she'd come back to school, and then he'd break that one, and it was like it went on for a really long time.
yeah, so when he's in high school, he contemplates suicide, and then doesn't. I don't remember the order, but he goes and meets her and apologizes to her. And then from there, they start a friendship, and the story is all about like, I guess, making up for that forgiveness and trying to move forward from that bad
Does it
experience.
become romantic between them or just friendship?
I think they hold hands.
There's a little bit of romance, but that's not. I don't think that's a center point.
Yeah, it was more about him like making up amends, trying to give her the experiences she lost.
How do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel about the one who is not solely responsible, but maybe the primary reason for her suffering coming back and trying to make amends for it?
So I believe when she started primary school, right? That was her first time going to school with hearing aids. So this really did like push the trauma on her. I think he does try his best. I mean, I'm not trying to excuse bullying, but he was in elementary school. And I think he did get he got what he deserved, but like he was also severely bullied. He got isolated, all that stuff. None of his friends would talk to him anymore.
Yeah, it got so bad he couldn't even look people in the face.
And the teachers, the worst part were the teachers. They were definitely the worst people in this entire series.
I'm imagining them like the Dursleys.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't say the Dursleys. It was more like Snape. Just ignoring all the bullying and just
not their
accepting
problem.
everything. So like I think this is like a common thing in Japan, even in like American schools, where the teacher, like if there's bullying in a class, the teacher would rather just ignore it and hope it doesn't, like they don't have to deal with it. And because in this case the teacher also had to deal with it because the Shoko's mom got involved, the teacher wanted to push blame on one student. He didn't want, like, it would look bad, like it would look worse if the entire class was bullying a girl versus one kid was bullying a girl. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he allowed it to happen, so he used Shoya as a scapegoat.
For sure.
Do you feel like this is an accurate representation of somebody with a hearing loss? And do you also, I don't know, like, how do you accept his redemption arc?
I would.
Like, do you think that was how do you feel that the story was handled? I guess, was it well researched? Like, what are your thoughts on it, specifically focusing on the disability aspect?
I think, I mean, it's a work of fiction, so of course it's not going to be completely accurate. They do have Japanese sign language. They use Shoya is learning it to try to better communicate with Shoko. That's part of his what he does on his path to redemption, I guess.
I think he learned it before he met up with Shoko again, right?
I think so. He at least learned some. Not every deaf person is going to be bullied in their class, clearly. And like one fictional character representation is not going to represent everybody, but I don't know, I don't feel like it did a disservice, but I'm sure it's probably not the most accurate either. I don't know, I'm not I don't have a hearing impairment, nor am I deaf, so I can't really speak on that.
It seems like
But
it's a bullying story as much as perhaps more than it is a story about disabilities.
I would say yes, but like she was bullied because she was of her hearing loss. I think they did
Yeah.
like a decent job because like being deaf, I'm sure like to that extent is very
Yeah.
isolating. And like if your entire class is bullying you, like I'm sure like the PTSD that comes from that, like you're not good, it's gonna be hard. I don't think she has any
Even as an
friends
adult.
after this place, right? Well, no, like I don't remember if she had like any close friends. Do you remember Bees?
um
Like she has her younger sibling.
she does have a younger sister. I think I don't know if she had any close friends. I know she was close with her grandma.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't think it was a focus. Most of the focus was on
Shh.
the friends from elementary school.
Yeah.
Or classmates, I should say. Talking more about bullying and depression here, I feel like it's a pretty accurate representation of that, at least. Because there are people who, people who watch from the sidelines are complicit in
I'm
situations
drawing
like
political
this.
parallels now.
And it takes...
Sorry, let's not get into that.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, like the bystander thing. Like, I mean, if it's pretty common if you're a bystander, you're not gonna think
Right.
that it's your fault, even if you're just as responsible
Right,
for
inaction
letting
makes
it
you
happen.
complicit too.
Especially if you're on the sidelines. And I think what happened was that they were teasing her and she laughed along. Especially if you
Right.
laugh along. That's kind of like...
Yeah.
Certainly complicit in isolating someone. Even if you're not the one
Maybe
putting
even
out the comments or
encouraging.
doing the
Yeah.
actual shoving.
You're definitely just as responsible. Even no matter how much you tell yourself, you are responsible. I do like how a lot of the characters like do end up trying to take responsibility, except
There was also the girl with the long black hair who, when she saw Shoko again, she immediately started to tease her like she did in
oh yeah,
elementary school.
she had a crush on Shoya, but she also blamed it on everything on him too.
So we've only been over 2 series now, but do you think that because both of these stories seem to be really highlighting the hardships of those with disabilities. Do you think we need more stories like that? Or do you think we actually need less and more stories where people with disabilities are represented, but it's not just all about their hardships? And it's not all like tragic stories about those with disabilities. That we need more focus on the positive and fulfilling lives that they can lead.
Well, Kingyu Su, I don't know if you've read it. It was really cute. It wasn't like a tragic. It's not tragic. It's like a cute, fluffy shoujo, and coincidentally, the guy
So
is deaf.
it doesn't really highlight struggles he goes through. It a little.
It does a little. Like they still address it, but like the shoujo part of it is pretty prominent versus like I don't know. I feel like what was it? The one we
Perfect
just
World?
talked about earlier. Let me try to find. Yeah, versus Perfect World. It's kind of I think Perfect World was kind of heavy on like all like highlighting every single struggle, you know. King Yusu like kind of touched it, but it wasn't super detailed.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a place for both types of stories. Because, I mean, some disabilities, they are the ones that are a little bit more debilitating. Of course, they're going to be more hardships in their everyday life. But they also live like, they're also a person who lives a normal
I agree.
life,
I
you know?
think we need both. But I feel like there's less out there that's just that shows like that they can still lead a very normal life and we can still interact with them in a very normal way. you don't necessarily have to overthink the way you interact with a person with a disability. Like, I work around a lot of people who use a wheelchair, and you start to understand that, like, there are things you can do which are really helpful, like obviously holding the door open, but sometimes you need to wait to let them ask you for help, and it will depend on whether the person has recently acquired this disability or whether they've had it for a long time. Like older folks who are using a wheelchair probably haven't been using it for very long, so they'll want you to push them, and they'll want you to offer your arm so that you can help them stand up. But like those who are younger and have had the disability for a while, like they tend to want to be more self-reliant and move themselves around. So you just learn to accommodate them in ways that it's like effortlessly accommodating them. Like it doesn't require a whole lot of thought or asking or like
where it's not an inconvenience at all.
You're not, it doesn't require a lot of overthinking. Like it just becomes a very fluid interaction. And I guess that's what I'm getting at is like I would like to see more works that promote that we need to be very thoughtful about this matter, but in our interactions, like they can be more fluid and they can be more comfortable. You don't have to feel uncomfortable around someone with a disability because you don't know how to handle it. Like that's just kind of making it about you. When you
and you just end up ignoring that person too when they really just want a friend to talk to and not like a therapist, you know?
I've always thought the thing that a disabled person would want most is to feel comfortable in the interaction. Is to just focus on making the interaction very easygoing and comfortable.
The other manga of Yankee-kun to Hakujo Garu, I'd say that's pretty lighthearted too. Like they did, like obviously he's learning how to deal with the female lead who's blind. He's not being overly excessive, or like if he is, she would correct it. Like it's like I'd say it was a wholesome exchange between the two, him learning and her going through it. But one thing I don't know how it is in Japan, but I do know like in this, like not every blind person goes to like a special school for blind people. Most of them just go to public school.
Right.
I think unless it's like very, very serious, then they would go to like a specific school dealing with their disability.
Well, I really wish we had more of that. Like my middle school was not a special school, but it did have a course for students who were deaf. And I really think we need more integration like that so that children will grow up with others who have disabilities and interactions become more natural between them. So they don't really have to overthink or be confused on how to interact with those with disabilities. It just becomes normal. Like we really need to normalize it in that way. So I really wish we had more integrated schools.
Yeah, and that's why the representation of disabilities is important. And like, not even just manga, but like
in real life,
TV shows and movies.
There's been a really wonderful movement in like video games I've noticed towards representation of disabilities. Like, I just recently played Overcooked 1 and 2, and there's a lot of options for your little avatar chef to be using a wheelchair. And like, obviously that doesn't, cute. it doesn't make any difference in your play style. It's just, you like so many of the avatars have, like a lot of them are animals and a lot of them are people, but even the animals, like you can have like a wheelchair option. Or like I was watching the Gaming Awards just recently, a few weeks ago, and there was a award for best what was it? Best, I don't know, it was basically it wasn't representation. It was like accommodations for those with disabilities. So like one of them, which I thought was really touching, because I don't have arachnophobia, but I have a really severe phobia of cockroaches, and they was kind of similar. One of the games had like an arachnophobia setting where even though there were spiders, which were a mob in the game, it just turned them into like these little cute blobs. so they didn't remotely look like spiders at all. So those with arachnophobia could play this game without worrying about their fear being triggered. There's like a lot of colorblind settings coming out in games now, so we just need more of this.
Oh, there's this one phone game I play called Two Dots. It has like a colorblind mode too, which is nice.
I'm seeing a lot of that, which is great. It's really just opening up games to players with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that all of these options are starting to open up, as far as not only representing disabled people, but making games more accessible to them. Because even though we have, like, in America, we have the Disabilities Act, it's still not enough. Like, even in...
It's not enforced, I feel, enough.
No, it's not. Because even where I work, which is in an ophthalmology department where we run tests on patients, or, well, that's what I do, is I run tests on patients a lot. Our machines are crammed into small spaces that are not very accessible to people who use a wheelchair, or people who just have trouble sitting. Like, all of our chairs have wheels, which is very difficult for people who have trouble sitting and standing because they're afraid they're going to slide. I've had patients try and sit down and miss the chair and take a fall. I've had patients who the doctor requested this test for them, and I've said, I can't do it because the table won't go down low enough for them in their chair, or, the space in front of the machine is too small, and I can't get the patient can't get their wheelchair into that space. So
now you would think like a hospital would be
you would
better.
expect that to be the place with the best accessibility, and even that, like, it's not.
Yeah, I volunteer at like a cancer hospital, so obviously like there's a lot of people being wheelchaired. But sometimes like in through the doors, I've noticed like there's not enough space for people to be pushed through.
Yeah, it just feels hypocritical.
Like even just to get to the pre-op area, the place where you would like expect the most.
Yeah, we have to do sensitivity training where I work, and so it tells you things like, don't say wheelchair bound or wheelchair confined, say a person who uses a wheelchair. And like, I'm all for this sensitivity training, but it feels hypocritical when like you're not.
I didn't even realize that was offensive, wheelchair bound.
I mean, someone somewhere decided that we should avoid using that. I don't know that people who...
But they're the same people who thought Pepe the Frog is a Nazi symbol.
Right. I don't know. I'm not gonna push that terminology out or anything. But like, I'm all for the sensitivity training. It's just, it's not as important as the actual accessibility.
Getting the help you need. Like, the actual actions matter more than just talking about it.
And just the accessibility of physical locations. Like, we don't have a service that will go and pick people up. Like, people have to use their own, like, they have to pay and use their own service to get to the doctor. And many of these people who have a disability and, like, can't drive themselves also don't have the money to pay for that service. So they just can't get to the doctor.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Anyway, let's get back to manga. Did you have any you wanted to talk about these?
Sure.
Actually, yeah, because you were saying earlier that you wanted more lighthearted disability representation. And there's a recent one, it's ongoing right now, it's actually being simupubbed, A Sign of Affection, or Yubisaki to Renren, which I think does a pretty great job of being... It focuses... I mean, the main character, Yuki, she is deaf completely, and she has hearing aids, but they don't really help her. I think she describes it as everything just kind of sounds like garbled up. But she's deaf, but she's still like, she's still happy, and she can still live a normal life. She says she likes cute things, and she likes dressing up. And she has friends. She has some friends, one friend who knows sign language, but the rest don't really. But they can still communicate just fine. They use like text, or they write down on boards. And it's a main character who doesn't let it like
Get to her.
Get to her.
It sounds like this story is trying to tell us that disabled people are more than their disability. There's a lot more to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which
That's
is
great.
absolutely true.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's hard to have a story where have the disability be in focus, but also not be in
Yeah, it's a
focus, if that
tough
makes
balance to
sense.
strike, I think.
Since they're just normal people with flaws and strengths.
Exactly. Yeah, like, I think that they really, like, we just really want to be seen for, like, I think we want others to understand our struggle, but we also want to be seen for who we are and not just seen as a person in a wheelchair or as a deaf person. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more there than just that. That's not who you are. It's part of who you are, but it's not all that you are.
I feel like this manga does a really good job of that because there's one chapter where she starts dating a boy who is trying to learn sign language to be able to better communicate with her. And she wants to go travel with him. So she goes and applies for a job. And at the interview, the interviewer is wearing like a face mask because they have a cold.
She can't lip read.
And she can... Yeah, so she writes down on the piece of paper, she writes down all her responses and she says, "Can you please take off the mask so I can read your lips?" And the interviewer very quickly, asks a few questions and quickly ends the interview and leaves, and she doesn't hear back. And it's just... So it does tackle the issue of, like, clearly that person, though they wouldn't outright say that they don't want to hire a deaf person, was discriminating for her disability. But, so it does show the struggles, but that's, like, not the focus. Because she still says,
Right.
well, I'll just apply somewhere else.
That's good.
It's fine. So I think that one's... It's not over yet, so I don't know how it's going to end. Hopefully it won't take a nosedive. I don't think it will, but...
So it sounds like it's well-researched and well-represented.
Yeah. And they do teach... They do use actual Japanese sign language in it, and it does show, like, kind of teaching how to do it as the male lead starts to learn.
That's awesome.
I know reading lips isn't, like, a big thing.
No?
It's, like, one of those things that are, like, what do you call it? Just one of those, like, stereotypes.
Oh, I don't think so.
Like, assuming, like, all deaf people can lip read. That kind of stuff.
I think assuming, is a dreadful thing to do. But no, my cousin is deaf and she lip reads. That's primarily how she communicates with people, is through lip. She speaks. She can't hear herself speak. So she has that kind of. She can be difficult to understand at times. So that's a struggle that we go through. But as long as you're patient, like, you can have a conversation with her, but she has to lip read. So I think that a lot of the deaf people that I've encountered, they do lip read, but obviously, as you said, like, you shouldn't assume. And you certainly should not be hesitant to accommodate them with writing things down. Like, I have an anecdote about that, actually. When I worked at Lens Crafters, selling glasses, we had a customer come in one time, and he walks up to the desk and we greet him, and he doesn't respond. He just holds up a hand and he gestures at some paper, and like gestures that he wants a paper and a pen. So we give it to him and he writes down, like, "I'm deaf. Can we write everything down?" And then, like, you could kind of see immediately, like, nobody really wanted to help him because that sounded bothersome. Well, I'm not to toot my own horn, but I was happy to help him. So we did have, take a longer interaction because everything had to be written down. So he wasn't one of the people who could lip read, but I wound up making a really big sale off of him. Like, he bought a lot of stuff. So kudos to me for my patience, because I got a big incentive off of that. So I don't know if that's a good moral story, but
I kind of wanted to talk about because we talked about a couple manga with deaf or hard of hearing leads, and I thought it was interesting because I was making up a list of manga that featured disabilities. By far the most was of the physical disabilities was deafness. And I was trying to think about why deafness is so, I'm not going to say overrepresented, but so well represented in manga compared to even blindness or, have missing limbs or being paraplegic or anything like that. What I was thinking is probably because it's the easiest to represent in manga. Because you don't have to draw a wheelchair, and drawing a wheelchair might be hard. I don't know, I've never tried. You can still draw, because a deaf person, deafness is an unseen disability. Like, if they're not wearing hearing aids, you'll never know. So I think that might be why there's an overrepresentation of maybe not overrepresentation, but actually when A Sign of Affection started to be simulpubbed, the authors did an interview, and the interviewer asked what inspired them to draw the manga centered around a person with a hearing disability, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but they said that sign language and shoujo both are full of expressions and emotions that are entirely stated and exist beyond just the dialogue. You have to pay attention to expressions to more fully understand what's being communicated. So it kind of seems like it's almost romanticized.
I think I see what you're saying. It sounds like, as far as representing disabilities, it's a more convenient one to represent. Like how you pointed out that drawing out a wheelchair might be rather difficult to do every single time. Whereas there's not really much change to add to a character if they're deaf. You might draw a hearing aid in a few panels, but mostly you're just drawing a person. And then you get to draw a very expressive person, which lends itself to a comic format.
Mm-hmm. Like with blindness, you might need to draw out like a dog and the whole guide dog setup, or like I said earlier, a wheelchair. It's just more convenient or easier to just focus on deafness as a disability. And I feel like it's more represented in in real life media as well. I feel like I've seen more stories about being deaf than I've seen more shows or movies where there's like a deaf person versus blindness.
Sometimes I feel like it's a way for the show or media source or whatever to like get sympathy points. Like, I don't know, like grab people easily on an emotional level, which feels kind of like it's taking advantage of the state of being deaf. I'm having trouble putting that into words, but you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because they want to represent, they use deafness to represent disability on a whole. So they say, oh, look how inclusive we are. We have someone with a disability.
Yeah. Can you think of any, put a hard question to you, can you think of any shows or manga that you feel like do that? Because I'm struggling to think of one. But I feel like...
What's the question again?
Like, can you think of any shows or manga that feel like they're representing deafness for a more selfish reason, rather than trying to show how inclusive they are, like almost like the stereotypical like token Black person or token LGBTQ person. It's like the token disabled person. Like, they're throwing it in for inclusivity, but it feels like that's more of the motivation.
How I felt with Perfect World. Even though I did do like their research and everything, it just felt like, okay, here's our manga about being woke.
I see. Well, I don't feel the same way, but that's a really tough thing to determine, I think, without knowing the writer's intention, without really knowing more what inspired the writer. It didn't come off to me that way, though. Well, I did want to talk about one more manga briefly. It's not a shoujo. It's like technically like a romance sports manga, but I think it fits into shoujo. It's called Won Dance, WON Dance, and it's about a guy in high school who has a pretty severe stutter. And I really love the way this is represented because it's not like he's not like in your face bullied. He's not like openly bullied. It's not overly dramatic or emotional. It's just these.
Is that him on the cover? He's kind of hot.
So the art style is very interesting for One Dance. It's kind of hard to get used to. It's very stylized, but it's also very kinetic because it's about people dancing. So they'll show people like almost with like 3 arms or something because it's trying to indicate movement, and like their body proportions are really strange, but it's trying to get across this like very intense movement because they're trying to represent styles like crumping and breakdancing. So anyway, that aspect is really cool. But as far as the male lead being disabled, it's very subtle with the interactions he has with his peers. Like, people don't avoid talking to him, but he kind of avoids talking to others because he has this stigma in his mind about his stutter. And some people are like, don't really seem bothered by it, and then others seem like they need to question him about it. They're like, why are you stuttering? Like, are you nervous? And he'll try and say like, I'm not nervous. This is just something that happens when I talk. But like, he gets so tired of people asking him that question or assuming he's nervous. And like, it's just really great the way that they portray these interactions. It feels so real. And like I said, it's not overly dramatized, or like it's not playing on like sympathy for him. Like, and then he discovers, he gets invited by this girl to join the dance club. And, you know, there is an element there of romance between him and her where he falls for her because she doesn't really feel like she needs to address his stutter at all. Like, she just gets him without needing to, interrogate him about his stutter. And he really appreciates that. But also, like, he discovers that dancing is the way that he can communicate his feelings because talking doesn't really work for him. So he can begin to communicate through dance. But yeah, I really recommend that manga for a lot of reasons, for the art style, but also for, I think, a really nice representation of a disability that is not dramatized.
It sounds really interesting. I'll look into it.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's...
Like, stuttering is one of those things that, like, I didn't know it was an actual disability until, like in 12th grade. Like, one of my teachers had a stutter, and they were talking about how they had to go
speech
through
therapy,
like a speech pathologist and everything.
Well, with you know, my good friend, and then two people I'm really close to, and then my another cousin who also has a speech impediment. Like, I really appreciate a work like One Dance that represents it in a positive way, but in a not overly dramatized way, and just the fact that it's being represented at all also, because it's something that gets overlooked a lot.
Are there any last mangas people want to talk about?
I'm done.
I think I'm done.
I can't think of any more too, except like BL. Alright, everybody, I will be concluding this podcast. Thank you for joining us today as we tackled the interesting world of disabilities in manga. There's a lot of good representation, and we didn't really go into the bad representation. I think we'll be focusing
a lot of debatable representation.
Yeah, we had debatable representation. We'll do another episode on mental health, so please join us for that. We'll be I feel like in manga there's more bad representation of mental health than I'd say bad representation of physical disabilities. So please join us for that, and we will be concluding this podcast now. Bye!
Bye!
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Into the Shoujo-Verse. check out our social media. We're on Twitter at the Shoujo-Verse, YouTube and Instagram at Shoujo-Verse, and TikTok at Into the Shoujo-Verse. Thank you so much.